Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable, the fight between Diane Douglas and the State Board of Education continues. And did the governor warn business leaders against voter initiatives to fund public education? The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Bob Christie of the Associated Press, Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services, and Luigi Del Puerto of the Arizona Capital Times. New developments in the ever-developing feud between Superintendent of Public Instruction Diane Douglas and the State Board of Education. We've now hit the courts.
We are now in court. This has started in early February when Diane Douglas tried to fire the executive staff of the Board of Education. Doug Ducey interceded. They've made peace. They tried to change the law in the legislature. It never got out because some conservatives in the House blocked it. And then about 2 weeks ago, the Board of Education staff packed up lock, stock, and barrel from the Board of Education building, went to the executive tower to set up new offices, and Diane Douglas says this won't stand and sued. So now we are actually at the lawsuit phase where the whole point of contention is going to be decided by a judge. Who actually controls the staff of the Board of Education?
And this is a fascinating question because, look, the laws are horrible in this area. The Board of Education is created constitutionally. It sets policy. By extension, if it sets the policy, then its staff carries out the policy. Diane Douglas, elected on a campaign of trying to get rid of Common Core, said, well, wait a second, these staffers are undermining my plan to get rid of Common Core. Well, you can't report to two bosses like that. The statutes themselves are confusing. The statutes say that she is the administrator of the board employees because the board is not a full-time job. And I think the judge is going to have a hard time parsing out exactly how this fits. Truthfully, I think the law is more on her side than it is on the board.
Right, and you know, some people have completely dismissed Dan Douglas' position on this particular issue, but there is a legitimate dispute as to what exactly the laws mean and how they're going to be interpreted. And of course, this hasn't come up in the past because we hadn't had these kinds of firings in the past. But what the law says is that the superintendent is the executive officer of the State Board of Education, and that she shall direct the work of all employees of the board who shall be employees of the Department of Education. That's what the law says.
Well, that's what the law says. And as you mentioned, the legislature, I thought there was a deal. I thought there was an agreement on this, and then poof, it goes away.
There was a deal. Diane Douglas testified in favor of the deal. She says this will clear it up. It made the Board of Education's executive staff report directly to the Board of Education, took her out of it. She backed it. The governor backed it. The Senate passed it with only 2 no votes. It got to the House. And a group of conservatives in the House says, wait a minute, this is just like what happened in Wyoming a couple of years ago, where the governor tried to take away the power from the Secretary of Education. Rich Crandall, an Arizona state senator, was hired by their governor to run a new education department, and it went up to the Wyoming Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nope, governor, you can't do that. So those folks in the House looked at that and said, they're trying to take the power away from the elected superintendent of public instruction. We won't let it happen.
And the fascinating thing is these are the same lawmakers who say, damn activist judges telling us what it means. You had a chance to fix it and you did not. Now some activist judge, Patricia Starr, will in fact give a ruling. There's a hearing on June 26th, at least on the preliminary issue of should they have to go back to their old offices. Larger hearing down the road probably on the questions of the ultimate control that Luigi is talking about. And it'll end up at the Court of Appeals and eventually the Supreme Court.
Now, again, the board is at the moment trying to investigate bad teachers. From what I understand, they're allowed into the Department of Education building to do this, but they can't go back to the executive towers and do it remotely because Diane Douglas says, we're not going to let you.
Right, and it goes back to this very same issue. Who exactly is the boss? Diane Douglas is the boss. Her employees can't just take off and go to another office and work there. And so in this particular case, they're working at another office. And so from Diane Douglas' viewpoint, since they are her employees, if they want to work, they work in her building. And not just remotely work from some office and report to essentially another agency. I mean, there's another issue of sharing data. And from their viewpoint, from Department of Education's viewpoint, if there is supposed to be, if the Board of Education is going to be a separate agency essentially from ADE, then therefore ADE can't just share data.
Oh, no, wait a
With-
second. But
that's
see,
their position.
But that isn't even a good position, because it is the board that ultimately determines when to suspend, when to revoke a license. And that is statutory. So clearly, the board's investigators need access to that.
They need access, but they can only get
it.
access
Well,
if they go
they-
marching over to
Di-
Diane Douglas's
we-
building and say, "Can we please
When
come
we
in and
asked
get
the
access?"
superintendent, and she said, they have access anytime they want at their workstations, which are in my building.
All right. Nothing to add on that one?
It's a power struggle. It's obviously a power struggle. What we just saw in the last Board of Education meeting, and there was a half dozen teachers who were going to have their licenses revoked for various crimes. That's what the Board of Education does. It issues the licenses and revokes the licenses, and they have to have access to the data. So, why Diane Douglas doesn't want to allow them to roam in like their staff in Tucson does to the Department of Education, it's clear.
So with this in mind, we've got a pretty important function being done here, getting rid of bad teachers, or at least investigating them. You've got a whole education system that is just up, down, and sideways. And yet these are the headlines, Luigi. I mean, this is what people are talking. What a waste of resources.
Well, you know what they say about democracy, you deserve the leaders that you elect, right? I mean, this is the leaders that we have. There's a legitimate dispute as to who is the boss, and now the courts will weigh in. In the meantime, you have all these problems that, in theory, this state is supposed to be focused on: standards, getting teachers. I mean, Arizona has a terribly difficult time trying to get teachers. Making sure that improving the test performance of our students. There are a whole issue about inflation funding, budgetary issues. I mean, those things are supposed to be the things that we focus on, but obviously we're not.
Lost in this is the real reason that Diane Douglas wants to have control of the executive staff of the Board of Education. The executive staff is who puts together the plans for Common Core, who puts together the plans for
AZ
merits,
yeah.
and makes the recommendations to the board. They provide all the background material, and so Diane Douglas, of course, wants to be able to craft those independently and with someone that she can
And
consult.
she literally said, back in February, she called Christine Thompson, who's the executive director, and Sabrina Vasquez, who's deputy director, quote, two liberals who are trying to thwart my efforts to get rid of Common Core. Well, no, they administer the board's policy. The board says, we're going to have Common Core. Christine, Sabrina, the staff carry that out. And that comes back to my, two masters problem.
All right, so we'll find out who eventually gets control over the Board of Education. Should be interesting hearings next month, you said, June?
Yes.
Okay. Help me here, Bob. Did the governor speak in front of business groups and basically warn these groups that if you support a sales tax initiative to help fund education, I'm going to fight you, the state will fight you?
Well, his spokesman will say that's not exactly what he said. The folks who were there, quoted in the press as saying that's what we heard. It wouldn't surprise me if the governor is very nuanced in his the way he presents himself. It doesn't surprise me if he was in a closed room with someone that he might say that. He opposed tax increases in the past. He wants to reform the education agenda the way he wants it to reform. There is a large group of folks out there who are very upset about school funding in this state, both at the university level and at the K-12 level. And they are getting ready to run. There's strong consideration of initiatives that would raise taxes to fund schools better.
I don't even think it was that nuanced. From people I talked to, and I also talked to the governor about it today, it was very simple. I'm happy to work with anybody with a good idea. However, if you have a bad idea, I will work against you. And taxes are a bad idea. I will never support higher taxes. Never mind that we're spending less per student now than we did in 2008. We're going to reform the system. And is it a threat to say you're going to work against somebody? It's not like he threatened them, well, if you do this, I'm going to kill your tax cuts. He said, I think very clearly, and he admits, he said, I will work against any bad ideas.
And when he says he will work against any bad ideas, we've seen what happens when someone crosses this particular governor. Mesa school superintendent found that out. All of a sudden, dark money pops up out of the blue, and here we go.
I mean, some of the folks that were in the meeting are fearful that when the governor says, if you don't work with me, I'll work against you. If you're going to push a tax cut, if that is the message that he was sending, then therefore there would be dark money flooding in to make sure to support the governor's agenda. But I think that it's a legitimate concern in the sense that the governor in the past had been effective in opposing a tax increase. I mean, with Prop 204, he led that fight. He got what he wanted.
Well, and this is the thing. I think that unless Ducey comes around, we're not going to see a ballot measure. And I'll give you a perfect reason why. I was talking to a business leader today who said we've had 4 of these things on the ballot. 2 of them passed. In 2000, the 0.6% increase passed because it was the incumbent Republican governor who supported it, Jane Hull. In 2010, we passed the temporary tax to try to preserve education because an incumbent Republican governor supported it. The 2 that failed, 1990, Fife Symington running for governor as a Republican, beat up Terry Goddard over it, and it failed. 2012, Doug Ducey, already saying, I think I might like to be governor, campaigned against it and it failed. Without the support of a Republican governor, it will not pass, and the business community is not going to spend $3 or $4 million just to do that.
And that is the threat. The threat isn't I'm going to come after you. The threat is all that money you're raising, all that time and effort you're putting into it, it's going to be a waste because he may not be saying this, but there's dark money growing on trees out there in the wilderness.
There sure is. And as we saw with the Mesa incident, that dark money floods in if the governor's upset about something. We can't put 2 and 2 together other than 8 equals 4.
But not only that, I think even without dark money coming in and flooding the airwaves, for example, in support of whatever the governor's position would be on some theoretical tax increase, I mean, the governor, by himself carries a pretty huge stick. I mean, he has the biggest bully pulpit in the state, and he can use that pulpit to advance an agenda or oppose one. And the fact that he's been effective in the past, of course, there was money raised also to oppose the sales tax increase. And I'm presuming that if the governor were to oppose a sales tax increase, for example, if that were to be offered, say in 2016, I can see the governor raising a lot of money to oppose that as well.
But is education, and those previous votes that you talked about, those that passed, those that failed, was education as cut as much, I should say, then, as big an issue then as it is now?
No. Obviously, the 2010 measure, which was we had a $3 billion shortfall. Do you want to see another $1 billion cut out of education? So it was the threat of the cuts then. Look, fact is, we are spending now about $4,300 in state money per student. In 2008, we're spending $5,000 per student, and that doesn't even count for inflation. Business folks are concerned. I talked to Ron Schupman of Southern Arizona Leadership. He said, Howie, we're at the point where we've taken all these tax cuts. We've been told it's going to stimulate the economy. If it doesn't stimulate the economy and all we're doing is sending a message that we don't care about education, maybe it's time to look at the whole situation.
Well, all right, maybe it's time to look at Arizona's jobless rate and the economy in general. The jobless rate fell down a couple of tenths to 6%. It's still above the national average. And, I mean, it's nice that it's at 6%. It's better than 7%. But 300 private sector jobs created last month?
Yeah, the job growth is anemic at best. The state is not growing its way out of this recession that we've been in. We're not adding the amount of jobs we do. We hit this big bump last month where there was only a few hundred jobs added. The economists don't really know what's going on with why Arizona is not, doesn't have a skip in its step like other states do.
And the bigger problem for Arizona is that the jobs we're creating are lower paying jobs. We've talked around this table about the fact we used to be 35th in per capita and 37th, 39th, 41st. Perfect example. Governor had a big announcement. We've got 1,125 jobs for Comcast at a call center. And Bob and I, in fact, did the math, and we figured out, okay, the average salary is $12 an hour. And that's average. That means that includes the folks making the $80,000 and a bunch of $10 an hour jobs, for which the state is paying $9,000 per job. And if you do that sort of math, these are people who would also qualify for access. So we're not only paying for the job, we're providing health insurance for them, even if they could get it from their company, but the company, they might have to have co-pays. And yet the same month that we're adding that, we lost in Pima County alone 300 aerospace jobs. Those are the high-paying manufacturing jobs. And so we are in this downward shift. And as long as we're not funding education, the message is come to Arizona, we've got cheap labor, versus an ad I heard for Iowa earlier today, which was come to Iowa, we have highly trained workforce in bioscience and manufacturing.
Right, and you know, the fact is, and here's an interesting thing, by the way, I was going to say, the latest revenue collections in April show that the state is going to get about $233 million more than we had budgeted for in this last budget go around. And then if you sift through the numbers, the boost that we're seeing in revenue comes from JLBC things, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee things, from individual gains, income tax gains.
Capital gains.
Capital gains. And that means it's a volatile revenue source.
Right.
Here's the key part. The sales tax, which is our most stable and our biggest revenue source, is pretty much, it grew by about 4%. So it's pretty modest. So it's not really growing. We're not seeing the kind of growth that we would really want to see.
But why are we not seeing? I mean, we lost a ton of jobs, mostly retail, and I understand that that's volatile as well. Got a lot of government jobs, but those are seasonal positions that come and go.
A lot of it, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to the heart where Arizona's economy has been for the last 40 years, which is the home construction industry. That has still not returned. We are seeing new construction, but not at the rate that we used to see when we were having 4% and 5% and 6% yearly growth.
Added 1,300 construction jobs. Added. That was the bright spot of the whole thing.
But we're still only at 55% of where we were at the peak, at the recession.
So is it a bump in the road, or are we looking at something more here?
Well, when we talked to Aruna Murthy, who's the chief economist over at Department of Administration, she said, look, I'm concerned because when we're starting to lose retail jobs in April, when I'm seeing these weak numbers, she's saying, I'm not saying we're headed toward a recession, but she said, I'm watching this real close.
And some folks are watching as well the ramifications to the welfare limits that the legislature put through last session. We kind of got those numbers in. Benefits to be cut off after 12 months. A lot of families, a lot of kids.
1,700 families, 2,700 kids will be thrown off the program after 1 year of eligibility. Now, of course, the governor said this week, now be clear, this doesn't start until July of 2016.
Yes.
But it's a tiny amount of money. It's $4 million. It was originally projected at $9 million, but now, you know, it's typical. Once they pass it and they massage it a little bit, okay, it's $4 million. In the meantime, they've given away $30 or $40 million just this last session in tax cuts to the wealthy. The governor, we talked to him this week, and he said, not only don't worry about it, it's not for a year, that'll give them time to get on their feet, but I want to grow the economy, and therefore they'll have jobs. But the problem is, as was debated on the floor of the House and in the Senate as well, the people who are getting this $250 or $280 a month check are either unemployable or they're single moms who have just had a baby and they're buying diapers and they're buying rice and beans and trying to just scrape by with a small amount of aid.
And remember, this is only a piece of what they did. They also voted to ask the federal government to allow new limits on the Medicaid program in terms of lifetime limits, in terms of co-pays, in terms of surcharges and everything else, and work requirements. And you know, the federal government, and Bob's also talked to the folks at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, why would we do that? This does inconsist with the program. What's interesting about this is the politics. We would have the shortest welfare of any state in the nation. Again, most of it paid by the federal government. And yet Kelly Ward is out there advertising, if you want this kind of leadership in Washington, vote for me. So the politics of it.
So any chance of these limits at all, any chance at all, being extended?
I think the governor made clear that he believes that first off, if you're giving them plenty of time to transition, Second off, a year is long enough, and we're going to grow the economy so that these folks can get into the economy and make money. There's not a lot of
But we're
of
not growing the
political will.
economy. That's the problem. That's the same thing that I say that Ron Schupman told me. We were told we have cut hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate income taxes, in research and development credits, because this was going to grow the economy, the Laffer curve. Well, we're sitting here, we got 300 jobs last month.
Right, but you mentioned that some argue that we're going to grow the economy if we do all these cuts. But I think what's really happening is this is a product of a philosophical debate at the state capitol. And the fact is that the cuts that we're seeing to welfare is a result of a belief that those folks really should be on their feet, that they should be finding work, whether work appears or not. I mean, and that's the thing, that's what we're seeing. I mean, this is not a novel thing. They've been trying this. The co-payments to Medicaid, for example, is something that they had kicked around for a couple of years. They want to do this because they believe, or there's this belief that if you did it, it would somehow improve their situation.
Right, it's a crutch. The conservative agenda, the conservative thought on these social programs is that yes, we want to help these folks, but we don't want to enable them to continue to be on the government dole. So you remember in the early 90s when welfare reform nationally, Bill Clinton and the Republicans got together, put a 5-year hard cap on welfare across the country. And with work requirements work requirements that eventually worked their way into the system, well, 5 years is now 3 years in some states, is now 2 years, is now 1 year.
No,
That's a pretty short time to get on your feet if you're a young parent.
And just to reaffirm, if you look at, for example, one welfare program that many from both sides of the aisle say that, yeah, it probably is a good thing. I mean, you look at child care, for example, what the state has done with its child care money. Right now, I mean, we used to appropriate about $80 million from our general fund for child care. That was, during the good times. Now we're appropriating zero. All the money that goes to child care comes from the federal government or from First Things First. And if you look at the arguments for child care, for example, if you have a single parent that needs child care, and if that single parent gets child care, that single parent gets to work. And those who, the folks like Dana Nehmark from the Children's Action Alliance are saying that, look, this is an economic engine. This is an economic thing. You fund child care, people will be able to go to work.
Well, it's the old Keynesian thing. You can't buy anything if you don't have any
Right.
money to buy it.
And
So-
one of the arguments against such a short welfare period is that if you don't give these folks some basic level of support, which in Arizona is the one among the smallest of all the states, it's $260 a month in general relief. They're going to end up in emergency rooms. They're going to end
Right.
up at homeless shelters. They're going to end up in using a lot of other services.
and which will have to be paid for. We've only got a couple of minutes left here, How I want to get to this Pinnacle West shareholder meeting. What happened there? I mean, we saw protests outside. We saw an attempt inside to get some sort of transparency going. Didn't sound like it went too far.
Well, you have to remember that the number of shares that the protesters control is about the number of people they had. I think it was 30. Look, these are shares controlled by major corporations, by trusts, by retirement funds, and they tend to vote pretty much the way the board wants, and they don't see it in their interest to disclose publicly, hey, we just spent $3 million to elect a candidate to the Corporation Commission, and so they're within their rights legally to say, no, we do what we need to do to protect our political interests.
Indeed, and it was an attempt to try to get shareholders to obviously it wasn't going to pass, but did it get the message across? Did the protests, are people starting to pay attention to this?
I think this keeps it in the news. I think every time someone writes a check to APS, they're thinking, are they paying the regulators off to allow them to raise rates? I mean, that's the seed that gets planted in people's minds.
I'll tell you what's actually been more in people's minds are these disclosures that Bob Stump has he has a love affair with his texting, and he did a lot of texting to Scott Musey from the Free Enterprise Club, and then a lot of separate testing to the two Republican candidates for the Corporation Commission, just coincidentally, and a lot of texting with somebody from APS as they were trying to fund. And now we're into some interesting areas of At what point are you helping to coordinate a quote-unquote independent campaign? And the Clean Elections Director said today now he's going to start looking into that.
To me, the bigger issue is that what is the impact to the credibility of the Clean Elections Commission, rather the Arizona Corporation Commission? And that's an issue because some people may think, well, if this arbiter of energy policy is not as impartial it should be, well, maybe we should change it.
All right, well, we'll see. We got to stop it right there. We'll see where that goes. That one is a story that I'm sure will continue. Good to have you all here. Thanks so much. Great work this week. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.